So, hi Rob. I thought what we'd do for the listeners, and there's a little bit of a teaser actually to our new listeners getting prepared for the first series of the Forgotten War podcast, which will be out this February, February 2025. Um, we're looking back now because Rob, you were away during sort of or just before the memorial sort of season, the 11th of November, and so on. Because of your trip to India, we didn't really have a chance to have a proper chat about it. So sort of now what I thought we'd do is just, I'm of the opinion essentially is that in terms of remembrance, specifically remembrance, the Burma campaign's biggest impact on how we remember everything to do with the conflict since the First World War, the biggest contribution of the Burma campaign has been the Kohima Epitaph. This is something that you've looked into plenty of times before, and obviously you've been to the Kohima Epitaph multiple times. I suppose for me, what do you think about that? How do you feel about the idea that it's the biggest contribution to memorialization in this country?
Well, Jack, you're absolutely right. I think one of the challenges, of course, we all have with the Kohima Epitaph, and we'll talk, just to remind you, if you need reminding about the Kohima Epitaph, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. Now, it's an extraordinary epitaph. It was actually on a list produced after the First World War, and it comes from a series of words pulled together by Maxwell Edmonds, and a list was produced by the War Office to enable communities in the UK to choose the epitaphs they placed on local memorials. And in 1944, interestingly enough, when the Second Division, after the Battle of Kohima, asked for the list to be sent to them, the one that had been unused, it was sitting there unused, was the what became the Kohima Epitaph. I just need to say at the outset, I think it's quite extraordinary that people know the epitaph. It's really quite amazing, isn't it? When you go home, tell them of us and say, for their tomorrow, we gave our today. Now, on the epitaph, it actually says, for your tomorrow, so you're sitting there, you're standing there rather, in Kohima, above the traffic control point, looking at the memorial to the Second Division, for your tomorrow. The original words were for their tomorrow. So you can imagine the difference being you're at a memorial at some village in the United Kingdom and you're reading it many years later, and there makes sense. They're the men who went and the woman who went off to war, and the epitaph, when it uses there, is right and proper. But actually, when you're in Kohima, you're standing there and it's as though the dead are talking to you and they're saying, for your tomorrow. You're looking at the serried graves of the dead at Kohima in one of the most tumultuous battles of the Second World War, a battle in which many more Indians fought than Brits, but a very significant turning point battle. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about it during the podcast. And it's talking to you directly. This is the real power of it. So today, the epitaph says, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow. It's speaking directly to you, and it's very powerful. As you say, I've been there many times, 20 times perhaps, I don't know, lots. I tend to go twice a year, partly for my role as a trustee of the Kohima Educational Trust, but also to study the battle and to take people around. And I do that with Sampan Travel, one of our sponsors of this podcast. And I'm never not moved by that remarkable epitaph. The point really, though, is that many people use that epitaph in the UK without understanding that it's actually on the Second Division Memorial at Kohima, and it relates directly to this quite remarkable battle in Kohima. And I think that's the little exercise and education that you and I are going to try and undertake, isn't it? We're going to try and make people connect the epitaph with the reality of the battle so they can understand it perhaps for the first time. And if that's all we do, we would have achieved something quite significant, I think, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You mentioned that, the reason why, I thought we should talk about this as well is the fact that, I saw, in the build up to Remembrance Sunday, people, sharing some of those images. I think some of them can be a little bit mawkish, but one of them, for example, of what was unmistakably a First World War battlefield, barbed wire, the Lien field with the helmet on it, poppies, muddy field sort of thing, but it had the Kohima Epitaph, and that's kind of what made me think it, because I can't think of anything else from the Burma campaign that has kind of entered sort of that wider sort of lexicon, that wider consciousness. Is there anything else that you can think of?
Well, you're absolutely right. The epitaph is a cultural leitmotif for us for remembrance, and I think you are right. What we need to do is we need to make sure that the connection, which I think is broken in many people's minds, they don't understand the relationship between those words and Kohima itself, and the original construction of the epitaph itself. The other one, of course, well, there are a number of other ones that are less well known. I think the most popular one, of course, is this idea of the forgotten army. So the 14th Army that was the Allied, the Commonwealth, the Imperial Army that fought through against the Japanese from October 1943 all the way to the end of the war. It had previously been the Eastern Army. But that group of men, Indians, and British and East and West African, and of many other nations as well, regarded itself as the forgotten army in a forgotten war, and that description has lasted. So when people talk about the forgotten war, then it refers primarily to the 14th Army and the war in Burma. The other one, of course, is Bill Slim himself, one of the great titans of British generalship throughout Britain's long island history. I mean, you will put him in the top 4 or 5 generals of all time, frankly. And I would put Cromwell, I'd put Marlborough, I'd put, I'd probably, well, maybe Haig, but certainly Montgomery and definitely Slim. And there might be a few other ones out there. I think the 3 that we sort of tend to go for are Marlborough, Slim, and Monty. But he's there. And the war that he fought was the forgotten war with the forgotten army, his army, the fabulous 14th Army in Burma. The other one, maybe a 4th one to talk about, is the Burma Star, now memorialized and kept in perpetual memory by the Burma Star Memorial Fund, which is the new organization that has arisen out of the Burma Star Association. And they protect the memory of the men and women who were awarded the Burma Star for service in Burma. And they do an amazing amount of fabulous work looking after current generations of people from around the Commonwealth who served in Burma during the war. And during the podcast, we'll get Mark Slim, Lord Slim, current Viscount Slim, on the podcast, and we'll interview him about the Burma Star Memorial Fund. But they're probably the major ones. So we've got the Kohima Epitaph, we've got the Forgotten Army, the Forgotten War, we've got Bill Slim himself, and the Burma Star Association and Burma Star Memorial Fund.
Yeah, fantastic, Rob. And that's a wonderful little teaser as well into series 2 about where we're planning to go with this as well. Really exciting, obviously, some ideas ruminating
already
and plans being made. But yeah, honestly, guys, thank you so much. This is just a little tiny teaser for what to look forward to. Remember, we've got season 1 coming up. Or series 1, sorry, season 1, a bit Americanized, I suppose. Series 1 coming up in February 2025. Please, obviously, follow us on all the socials. We're on Twitter, we're on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook. Please make sure you follow on for further news, further teasers. And also, it's worth saying we do have an email address, and we will, towards the end of the first series, we are going to have a Q&A session, and we have other plans in the future. But at the moment, we will have a dedicated Q&A question. So I'd like to encourage you to ask us questions on it, whichever social media channel it is that is easiest for you or that you use. And also we do have currently forgottenwarpod@gmail.com if you want to contact on us. Rob, I absolutely understand. We have been talking about this a lot for a long time now. We're so excited to get started.
It really is exciting, and thanks for prodding me to get this done with you, Jack. And I can think of no one better, frankly, to do it with. Your book on Forgotten Armor and the Burma Campaign was a joy to read, and we'll be plugging it as well as a few of mine podcasts. But if you really want to get stuck into sort of understanding a bit more about the Forgotten War, then A War of Empires is my big book in 2021. I have been writing about this for a long time, but I'd recommend getting a hold of that. Maybe Slim Master of War, which is a story of Slim's command during the Burma Campaign, but also Jack's book, Forgotten Armor. It's a cracking read. I think the real thing about your book, Jack, I can say it publicly, is that you've actually captured the entirety of the war, and you've focused it on tanks. But it's a really good encapsulation of the entire war, and it's a very easy read. But you've got plenty of reading to do if you want to prepare for it, and we look forward to seeing you in February.
Yeah, of course. Wonderful, guys. Yeah, the best place to get your latest on this will be obviously on our socials and by listening to the podcast itself, guys. Thank you so much. Take care.